This is an RX570. This is an RX580. This is an RX590. What's the difference? Well, let me show you. Welcome to another super exciting episode of Repair and Chat. This will be, I think, a new series where I just go ahead and do some modifying or repairs and talk at the same time. These will be longer videos, so I'll put a timestamp to where I'm actually done so you can forward if you don't want to get bored. But this is the XFX AMD RX570 that came in a system I picked up on the PC flipping series. I've never tried a 570. This is what I had before for a little while, was the 580. And it was pretty good. It was actually, I did a battle between my favorite 1060 and this card, and the 580 won by just the slightest of margins. It actually didn't benchmark as good, but it gamed better because of the 8 gigabytes versus 6. And then this is, wait, they look the same. Sorry, this is the 580. Yeah, 580, 570. This is the 590. The 590, I had the Sapphire before, and all it was really was an overclocked version of the 580. Better memory, and it was faster, but barely. It was just the slightest amount faster, but it did run cooler and it did draw less power. So out of all of these, if you can find a 590, I would get it because it's just better, but they're very hard to find. This is only the second one I've ever seen. 580s are all over the place. 580 is basically the most popular one. The 570, I don't see those much for sale, but if you've been looking at reviews, you'll see a lot of people reviewing the 580 2048 from AliExpress, and that is basically equivalent to a 570. And the difference is this has the 2048 CPU or GPU unit shaders, and then this has the 23. So what I did was I went to put this in, and I tried just an initial benchmark. It did about 75 FPS, which is kind of, 75 is kind of like on the low end of the 1060, maybe even the 3 gigabyte model. And then I overclocked it by 100 megahertz, and then it went to 79, 80 FPS, which is more than a 1060, and then it's approaching the 580 levels. But this thing got super hot, so I assume the thermal paste is not good. But then I was looking at the card. Look at the heat pipes. There's one missing. Should be one there and there. And this, I think this came out later because this is, it says RX570 Black Edition, XXX, whatever. Also, a lot of the AliExpress cards you'll find will just have just a chunk of aluminum if it's a really cheap one. But the reason why I'm doing this video is because on the EVGA side of things, I made videos about that where I converted the single fan to dual fan. You can swap the heat sinks between units. So my idea was, since this heatsink is terrible, I looked at the 580 and it looks exactly the same. It even has the heatsink that goes there where that should go. The board is a little bit longer, so I hope it fits, but we'll find out. This part right here might be a problem. See this part that comes down is going to be right here, but I don't think there's anything there. So my plan was to, you can't really overclock this more because all of these are overclocked factory by 100 megahertz, I think. So, and my attempt to overclock this one didn't work because it got too hot. So I was thinking, this 580 has problems. It has green lines on the screen. Why don't I just put this cooler on here, and then maybe we can overclock it more and kind of turn it into an awesome 580. So that was the original plan, and then I said, wait, well, what about the 590? It has the same heatsink too. So could we actually put the 590 on there and make it the most ultimate 570 ever? Not sure if that one's gonna fit, but I'm pretty confident about the 580 because it's very similar. It has the same power plug. That's usually where I run into problems with swapping heatsinks, is the power plug will hit something. And yeah, so let's get started. I'm gonna take all of these apart. And I mentioned earlier, I finally found my Amazon screw mat. I bought this years ago to fix iPhones, and I couldn't find it for the longest time. And I'm gonna link down below. They're about $14 now. They were 20 bucks back then. But I like this because, especially if you're gonna be assembling all of these things, it's convenient to organize the screws in these little holders. There's a magnet right here on the side. And then up here, there's more screw things, so I can keep the screws separate. So let's get into it here. I think that, yeah, somebody's been in this before because the warranty sticker's already broken. So I'm gonna put all the 570 stuff to the left so I don't get them confused. And they're pretty standard. I've had the other two apart already. They both have new thermal paste. So while we're taking this apart, now we can talk about this brand. The XFX brand, for some reason, I don't know if it's just me, but this card, and this card all have a problem. And I don't know if that's just a coincidence or the brand is bad. How is it possible that every single one has some sort of problem? And so on this 570, the DisplayPort doesn't work. On the 580, it has green lines in the screen. And the 590, which I made a video about, it actually won't work properly unless you underclock it, which is weird, but it works fine. You just take 100 megahertz off the clock, basically making it back to the base clock of the reference edition, and it works fine. I actually used it for about a month. So here's the heatsink of the 570. Thermal paste is pretty fresh. So it's not dry thermal paste. There's actually a lot of it on here. I wonder if somebody just put this here because this looks brand new, see? Yeah, when I first saw it, I was like, did they really sell it that way? So somebody tried to cool it down. Pretty simple board, actually. There's not much to it. Oh, you know what? We might have a problem here because the power pin connector is over here, and over on this one it's over here. So that might be an issue. So let's try the 580 first. Man, I thought that was going to work out perfectly, but let's see. We might have to make some more modifications. So put the 570 stuff over here. And here. But the 570, so I did the benchmark. I only ran it a few times. And it was getting to 82C. Then I ran it one more time with the fans up. It actually went up to 84C, which is kind of the dangerous territory. And then it starts throttling. And then I turned off the computer so I could take it out because I immediately thought of changing the heatsink. And the whole card, the back plate and everything, was just super hot. I mean, I hope that's not normal. Also, those fans are very loud. So let's compare the two cards here. So this is 580, this is 570. This has this tall bracket here. Memory's in the same place, roughly. These two, this is here, this is here, this is different. These are kind of in the same place. These are so simple compared to the NVIDIA cards. It's weird. Okay. So we don't want to take too long and bore everybody to death, but let's look at the two heat sinks. I would think that this would be good enough, but I guess, you know, AMD's run hot. So there's two heat pipes here, and there's 4 heat pipes here. This looks the same, similar. This has a big cutout here. There's a cutout here. I wonder. Yeah, the pins are going to be the question here. The power pin connector. So let's try it. Anyway, what I was trying to say is, worst case scenario, if I can't overclock it anymore, this 580 doesn't work anyway. So if nothing else, it would just make the 570 run much cooler and keep its turbo boost longer and just be a happier card, if that makes sense. And I'm not as familiar with AMD and overclocking. I've only tried to overclock these ones and the Sapphire, and what I have found is that they're already pretty much maxed out when they come out, especially the aftermarket cards. So you can't really overclock them that much. The NVIDIAs you can up to the limit, but these ones not so much. So this is clear. Interesting. So that cutout is still there for the power pin connector. And on this 570 heatsink, there's no connection for the memory. But on this one, the plate comes out. See here? Now it's touching the memory. And it's touching the memory here. And it seems, at first it didn't feel like it fit right, but what is it? I think it's, yeah. And when I first pushed it on, I seemed like I was hitting something, but it's just the thermal pads are so thick. So that is good. So at least we have a 580. Now this is kind of unnecessary. I was just planning, because the 590 works, so there's no reason to ruin it by doing this, but I want to do, outside of water cooling, this would be making the 570, aka the 580 2048, the coolest that it could possibly be. And you know, it's only a few screws, so I can always put it back later. I'll probably just put the 580 one on there for permanent, but this, I kind of laughed. I said, what if I put this big heatsink on the 570? And what it is even though they look the same, this is called the Fat Boy. And if you look here, oh, this is a mess. I remember when I opened this, I didn't have any thermal pads, so I had to use the old ones. But if you just look, it's the same thing. But look at the thickness. It's still for heat pipes. If you can see it, it's still for heat pipes. But look at the thickness of the heatsink. It's crazy. That's why they call it the Fat Boy. Now, will this fit? It's a question. Everything looks relatively the same. The fans, let's see. Fans look the same. I hate these fans, they're very loud. But the nice thing is the XFX has a silent mode. That means, oh, this is garbage. That means that if we put this giant heatsink on here and it never gets hot, the fans will stay quiet all the time. And that is what I like. Quietness. So let's do a test fit and then we'll strap it on and we'll do some overclocking. Let's see. Yeah, same thing. It's the same heatsink, it's just bigger. Check that out. I'm not going to change the back plate, I don't think. I don't know why these are bigger. It doesn't do anything. Are there any thermal pads in there? Nope. Is this metal or plastic? Yeah, I don't really see the advantage of the back plate. I think they were just trying to make it look bigger. So on the, what was it, the 1070 that I bought, I put the thermal pads on the back plate, and it actually helped out quite a bit. I'm not going to clean this up too much because I'm probably going to take it back off later. Here we are. So the first ever RX570 Fat Boy. Huge heatsink, big fans. So I ran into an issue when I first put it on. I did a test fit and the thermal pads were too thick, so I wasn't getting good contact on the on the GPU. So I just went ahead and took those out. Hopefully, see how close the metal plate is to the memory? It's like almost touching it. Hopefully that helps. Plus the bigger heatsink and fans. Have to find some kind of thinner thermal pad, or just leave it like this. Maybe it won't get that hot. Let's see. So we went from, again, 85 max on this 570. So let's put it on the benchmark and see what happens. So I did some initial testing with the new setup, and I was kind of not happy with the results. It was cooler, of course, but I couldn't overclock anymore. So I ended up taking it all apart again. I actually put thermal paste in between the memory and the memory plates of the heatsink. And I also changed to the bigger backplate because it had more holes in it. And I removed the plastic thing that's in the way. And now it's really good. I mean, I was able to overclock to way more than before. So that's going to be in the other video that I'm posting, because this video is too long. This is a 570 Extreme overclock. And check out that next video. I'll post them right back to back so you can see the results. It was pretty good. Definitely worth it. Not very expensive, kind of free. But the RX570 is better than I thought.